Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Thursday, August 28th, 2025. And this is USA Today's The Excerpt. Today, what we learned from USA Today's exclusive conversation with Vice President JD Vance, plus is the U.S. running a covert operation in Greenland, and how some employees are defying return-to-office mandates. In an exclusive sit-down with Vice President JD Vance yesterday, USA Today White House correspondent Francesca Chambers asked him how he felt about being a heartbeat away from the presidency, his ambitions for 2028, and the administration's controversial deployment of National Guard troops in American cities.
I mean, look, we don't want to go in where we're unwelcome. There's a political reason, because what might very well happen is that these people, mayors or local governors, stand up and say, we don't want the National Guard. This is a dictatorship. Trump is a fascist, blah, 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 blah. We don't want people to stand up before a press conference and accuse the president of being a fascist, accuse the National Guard of being part of some dictatorial coup, when in private, they're actually thanking us for bringing law and order back to these communities.
Vance also said his Oval Office blow-up with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky elucidated some issues for the American people, though it's not necessarily how he wanted the meeting to go. He meanwhile defended Trump's push to fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, and Vance also remarked on Trump's distinctive style of decorating the White House and warned the NFL not to favor the Kansas City Chiefs now that one of their star players is engaged to Taylor Swift. You can hear more of the interview and Francesca's takeaways with our colleague Dana Taylor in a special episode of The Excerpt beginning today at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on this feed. 2 children were killed yesterday and at least 17 people were injured when a shooter fired through the windows of a Minneapolis Catholic church toward young students worshiping at Mass, authorities said. The 2 children killed were aged 8 and 10. The assailant died from a self-inflicted wound. Authorities said weapons used in the attack had been purchased legally and recently. FBI Director Kash Patel said the attack is being investigated as an act of domestic terrorism and hate crime targeting Catholics, but police said they have not circled a motive. You can read more on usatoday.com. Is the U.S. running a secret operation in Greenland? I spoke with USA Today World Affairs correspondent Kim Helmgaard to learn more. Hello, Kim.
Hey, wonderful to be back on the show.
Thanks for joining me. So just starting with the latest news on this, I mean, what are the allegations in Denmark about American covert influence operations in Greenland?
Greenland has dropped out of the news a little bit, so it's kind of interesting to see it back in the news. But the allegations that are coming from Denmark are essentially that some trio of foreign actors, 3 Americans, have sought to influence the future of Greenland in some form by conducting what the Danish authorities are describing as covert influence operations in Greenland. And this is like meeting with business leaders, meeting with perhaps pro-US members of the Greenlandic community, and just kind of what it says on the tin, influence political opinion in some form in a way that benefits Trump's idea of taking over Greenland.
Interesting. Well, I know they've now summoned the top American diplomat in Denmark to, I guess, try and get some answers here, Kim. What do we know about those meetings? Who is this diplomat and how is he approaching those?
We know absolutely nothing about those meetings, which is fairly standard. The top diplomat in Denmark right now is a guy named Mark Stroh. He's actually the sort of what they call the chief of mission, because there is no current U.S. ambassador in Copenhagen. He's the most senior diplomat in Denmark at present. And I have to say, summoning a top diplomat is fairly normal. And this very thing has actually happened back in the spring when there were separate allegations that came out. It was a story published in the Wall Street Journal saying that the White House had stepped up spying operations in Greenland as a result of its interest. And the charge d'affaires at the time was also summoned by Denmark's foreign minister, Lars Rasmussen, to give an account of what happened, an explanation, presumably to offer an apology. That's what these things are about.
Kim, what's the sense from the Trump administration and their perspective on this back home, considering the latest news? And I guess just in terms of the broader picture here, I mean, what is the Trump administration angling for here when it comes to Greenland?
The immediate reaction from the White House is crickets. They've said absolutely nothing. And in fact, I was in touch with the U.S. consulate in Nuuk, which is the capital of Greenland. They referred all their questions to the U.S. State Department. The State Department has not said anything yet. And Trump, as we all know, likes to sort of say things himself. He has not commented yet. I will add that, as many in our audience might know, Trump's interest in Greenland can be boiled down to two things as far as we understand. One is that he's looking at the sort of idea of Arctic security, and as the ice melts up in that area, there's reported to be many more sort of Chinese and Russian ships around who are conducting spying operations of their own. And so Trump, the thinking goes, views Greenland as some kind of way to push back on that, particularly if he can bring it closer into the U.S. orbit. There is a U.S. military base there. He wants to put more of them on there. The other factor here is Greenland's vast mineral wealth, including so-called rare earths, which are integral to many of our TVs and computers. And Greenland, the geologists and the scientists tell us, does have a lot of these rare earths, but then they're untapped. They're also quite remote. It's not clear how easy it's going to be to access them, and so on and so forth. But there is an economic angle to his interest. Stepping back from that, I've been in touch with many of my sources in Greenland asking, like, who could these three Americans be? Because Nuuk, the capital, it's a small place. Foreigners kind of stand out when they visit, and we don't know their IDs. But I think what we can comfortably say is that there are some Americans who have been operating in Greenland over the last months, doing business of different kinds. That's not to suggest these are the same Americans we're talking about. But at the same time, there's not many Americans, operating in Greenland. So who knows?
Kim Helmgard covers world affairs for USA Today. Kim, I always really appreciate picking your brain on stuff like this. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
The White House says it has fired Susan Menarez, the director of the CDC. The move comes after she refused to step down from her post amid a policy disagreement with Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Menarez's ouster, less than 1 month after the Senate confirmed her to the role, was followed by resignations from 3 other top CDC officials in protest of Kennedy's leadership, including his direction on vaccines. Kennedy, a longtime skeptic of vaccines, had pushed for Menarez to support changes to the CDC's vaccine policy, the Washington Post and New York Times reported, both citing multiple anonymous sources. Her departure came on the same day that Kennedy announced changes to COVID vaccine eligibility. The FDA approved updated COVID-19 shots for fall, implementing the tightest restrictions on who can access the vaccines since they became available. Under the updated approvals, only those over 65 and people with existing health problems will be recommended for the COVID-19 vaccine, according to federal guidelines. The Social Security Administration's chief data officer said in a whistleblower complaint that the personal information of more than 300 million Americans is at risk of being leaked or hacked after employees of the Department of Government Efficiency uploaded a sensitive Social Security database to a vulnerable cloud server. Lawyers for the chief data officer alleged in a complaint yesterday that DOJ's actions have effectively created a live copy of the entire country's Social Security information. That includes all info required to apply for a Social Security card, like Social Security numbers, names of the applicants, places and dates of birth, parents' names, race and ethnicities, citizenship, and other personal information. The complaint, first reported by the New York Times, cites possible violations of Social Security protocols and federal privacy laws. A spokesperson for the Social Security Administration said in a statement that the administration and its commissioner take all whistleblower complaints seriously, but rejected the concerns raised yesterday. While many employees are being pushed back to the office, not everyone is complying. I spoke with USA Today senior reporter Jessica Gwynn for more. Jessica, thanks for joining me.
Hi, Taylor. Great to be with you.
So, Jessica, what does some of this new research tell us about workers defying, really, their boss's marching orders on returns to the office?
Well, showing up in the office 5 days a week was the norm until the pandemic shut down offices across America. And what we saw is even as offices reopened, many workers continued logging in from home or working a hybrid schedule 2 to 3 days a week. And flexible hybrid schedules are still pretty common today. But we have seen more major employers issue these mandates to return to the office. And I got a hold of a new report from the Flex Index that said that the average number of days employees are required to be in the office rose 12% over the past year. But at the same time, office attendance only rose 1% to 3%. One expert I spoke with explained the discrepancy this way. He said it's like jaywalking. Everyone knows there's a law against it, but nobody obeys it.
Yeah, I like that analogy. Well, what are the benefits really, Jessica, for employees when it comes to remote work? We know this is clearly a friction point. What did you hear from folks on why this is such a difficult thing to concede?
Well, lots of people, and especially parents and people with disabilities, extol the virtues of working from home. There are lots of advantages in terms of flexibility to manage childcare and school pickups or take breaks for doctor's appointments. Very few people, you'll probably not be surprised to know, are fans of long commutes. They say these commutes increase stress and they reduce productivity. There's also costs associated with going into the office, apparently an average of $61 a day. And then, of course, there are the usual complaints that we can probably all relate to: cramped workspaces, fluorescent lighting, annoying coworkers. Oh my God, what did someone just put in the microwave?
Well, a lot of work can clearly be done remotely, Jessica, but then why do employers want workers back at the office? What are the benefits for them?
Well, this is one of the most contentious issues in the workplace today. Not all employers are sold on bringing people back to the office full time, but many major employers are taking advantage of the cooling job market to return to a pre pandemic norm of having everyone show up every day. They say nothing is better than in person collaboration. They say it boosts innovation, it forges tighter bonds, it nurtures the company culture. And some companies like JP Morgan, Chase, and Amazon have said returning to the office is just a non negotiable.
So, folks are clearly defying some of these return to office mandates. What are you hearing? What are some of the different ways workers are doing so, and what strategies are they going about?
Well, workers use a variety of methods to escape scrutiny. They schedule emails that are sent after they left the office. They coffee badge or lunch badge, meaning they swipe into the office, grab a cup of coffee or eat lunch, and then they head for home. Some simply ignore these top down mandates to return to the office. And because tracking and enforcement is sometimes lax, they're able to fly under the radar. Then there's the case of, higher ranking or top performing employees who use their clout to cut special deals so they don't have to come into the office, or at least they don't have to come in as frequently as others do. Another strategy is to comply fully at first, but then slowly ease off as top bosses move on to other priorities.
Work from home holdouts may not be able to flout the rules much longer, Jessica. Why is that?
Well, after years of cajoling workers, employers are starting to take a harder line. They're encouraged by the progress they've made in getting employees back to the office, so they're looking to get even more butts in cubicles. And they're doing this in two ways. First, they're monitoring employees' comings and goings, whether through badge swipes, Wi Fi usage, VPN, cell phones, etc. A recent survey found that 69% of companies are keeping tabs on how often employees come into the office and how long they stay. And that's up from 45% last year. Second, they are stepping up enforcement. Nearly 37% of companies are taking enforcement actions, and that's more than doubled from last year.
All right, another interesting piece from you, Jessica. Jessica Gwynn is a senior reporter with USA Today. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Taylor.
Thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio. And as always, you can email us at podcasts@usatoday.com. I'm Taylor Wilson. I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.